panel discussion on lessons from the past for the connected future, understanding IoT security. In the era of machines replacing human decision-making, security and privacy are significant challenges. Closely bound to cloud and cloud security are big data aspect of the IoT that requires security. So, what does this mean for the modern organization? Where should companies be focusing their efforts when working to secure their cloud and IT environments? The panel will discuss on the lesson learned, which includes selecting the right partner and the key strategies for the successful implementation. Put your hands together. Let's welcome the moderator of this panel discussion, Mr. Mahendra Kumar, Leader Infrastructure and Security Consulting, PwC. Panelist, Colonel Inderjeet Singh, Consulting CIO and CISO. A very, very warm welcome to you, sir. Mr. Shaik J Ahmed, Director, Cyber Security Consulting and Advisory. Welcome again. Mr. Sachin Rajguru, CISO, Bank of South Pacific. Warm welcome to you. Mr. Yogendra Rajput, Independent InfoSec Consultant. A warm welcome to all of you. I'll hand over the session to the moderator.
Hi, very good evening. So I think we have a wonderful panel here, and the discussion for today is on the IoT security, right? So before that, I think let's talk a little bit of what is IoT and why it's important to consider security in this revolutionary concept, right? So I guess in the last decade or so, we have used IoT, and it's been part of our lives, and every industry, right? Media, entertainment, to manufacturing, transportation, etc. So this brings a lot of complexities, right? Number one is, as you all know, more devices, more issues, right? And by looking at a lot of studies and case studies, we have found that there are tens of billions of devices that would get connected by 2020. Now, what does this mean is that we obviously can protect certain devices which are behind our firewalls, right? But this increases the complexity of so many tons of devices, sensors, and how do we ensure that they are securely communicating, their access controls, device authentication, etc. So, keeping that in mind, the first more important challenge that we have is on how do we do secure patch managements, right, for these devices. So we're going to discuss certain things on this today. So touch upon the frameworks, what are the industry seeing, right, and how do we comply from a policy perspective, right? So I'm sure you might be heard of a saying that if you want peace, you got to be prepared for a war, right? So same things, we're going to touch on certain key aspects of IoT security, and I urge all our the cybersecurity or security community to be very much part of this. The reason is that we got to push a lot of these vendors who manufacture these devices to be securely, embedded within their chips and their processes. Because that's the key, because any company today can make a car, right? And we all know that. But they cannot make facilitations like, they cannot make roads, they cannot make highways, they cannot make refineries, they cannot make petrol pumps. So these devices that are coming out as IoT sensors, right? They are having a huge risks that we all know. So we're going to discuss that and then see how do we protect the entire framework of IoT, right? So I have Inderjeet and Shaik, Sachin, and Yogendra, right? So, should I sit here? No, that's fine. So, Shaik, can you tell us what trends do you see today, and where all these connected devices are getting to in our various industries, right? And what is the complexity that will bring in?
Yeah, thanks, Mahendra. Thanks for this opportunity. Thanks for the InfoSec Intelligence Conclave Explorer exhibitions. So basically, if you see like the growing trend of IoT devices, the connected devices are penetrating into the human lives actually. So it was a saying like it was a survey by around 2012 or 13 kind of a thing that by 2020 it will be around 20 odd billion devices connected to the networks actually. So by we see latest surveys from the Big Four that approximately 100 odd billion devices are already into the connected networks. Yeah. So it is beyond the scope of our imagination that how many devices are getting connected internally and interconnected devices. So it started with smart cars and like a smart connectivity. Now is moving to smart cities. So in everywhere and everywhere, like we required the good experiences, user experiences. When we leave the office and we want our devices at home to be interactive, and we want that the things are like at our fingertips to control them from our mobile applications and web applications, and we need to have the visibility around how the devices are functioning from remotely and all those things. So the major threat here is the trend of cyber security perspective is so if you take the cyber security for the mail security, in fact like email security or communication mail security, if you consider that it is on the scale of 0 to 10, if you measure it at around 7 now, then IoT security is around 2 to 3. Is the survey, and it is the acceptance of the agencies which are configuring the communication communication platforms and the communication channels for the devices. How does these devices communicate? So here at a stage where we are highly depending and highly attracting towards the connected devices and connected environment. What about the security? We are taking connected devices environments into our life, not only our lives, but into the healthcare, into the robotics, into the there was a show like a conference kind of a thing, seminar, where a IoT hacker has shown that like the child monitoring cameras, the CCTV kind of child monitoring devices, health monitoring devices can be hacked. Can be turned on, can be turned off, can be taken, even the video stream can be diverted towards the different routes. So here the biggest trend going is like we are getting much involved into, much attracted towards the smart connectivity through the devices, but we are forgetting the basic principles of security here. So there is going to be a big bang in terms of security. So this is what my take from here. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Thanks.
So thanks, Shaik. I think it gives a very good analysis of your, the predictions that's going to be coming in. So having said that, it increases a huge complexity for us in terms of cloud, how these devices are getting into, and over the last, if you look at last 1 decade, all these computers and chips, right, which we used to protect behind our firewalls and our protection devices, was much easier, right? Now, if you put all those things into a small IoT device, the issue that would come up is they don't have much processing power. They would consume more, inputs for, putting encryption on it. So that gives us how do we secure them, right? So we got to identify certain frameworks. So Inderjeet, from your side, right, what are the secure frameworks that we can implement? And it can be on any industry, from IoT in smart cities or IoT in healthcare, right? So if you can throw some light.
So I'd like to keep the discussion a bit interactive post-lunch session. Just want to know, how many of you are using Windows XP in their houses or some applications? Anyone? Of course, the Indian banking system is still on Windows XP, the ATMs in particular. Why I said so, when we talk about the IoT ecosystem, we need to talk of the life cycle management of the IoT devices and the IoT security. Right from the beginning, when an IoT device has been fielded, rest be assured it's going to be hacked. Once it's going to be hacked, it's going to be patched. once we are going to patch it, it's going to be hacked again. Till the time we find a new device and we dump that particular device in limbo. And these devices can be made to play a zombie. Like Windows XP today, it's already reached its end of life, and the Microsoft is no more giving any support to it. So what happens in case it's going to be hacked? Same is the case with the IoT, right? So IoT lifecycle management, starting from its inception till the time the device is being replaced, and the device, the new device which is going to come up. Plus, now coming on to the encryptions, their patch management, their software upgrades, it's going to be a big problem. The surface threat area for IoT device is going to be huge. That is the basic problem what we are facing as of now. And as regards the protocols and the standardization is concerned, there are different agencies taking different parameters to come up with a standardization. IETF is doing in a different manner. IEEE is coming up with a different protocol manner. So still that IoT standardization is in very fluid state. Okay. So in times to come, till the time this is not formalized, we are going to have a problem area. And IoT is going to be a bigger problem when it comes to a cybersecurity or the security of the devices is concerned. Because there's always going to be a trade-off between the amount of security, the amount which you're going to spend for the cybersecurity, vis-a-vis the cost of the device or the cost of the encryption or the networks or the other things. A point about the cognitive intelligence which was being touched upon, that's again going to be a problem as to how much of data or how much of intelligence we are going to pump in or permit end device to be. Right. So these are some of the starting thoughts for the cybersecurity for the IoT space.
Sure. Thank you, Inderjeet. So Yogendra, what about your view in terms of making the secure communications between the different IoT devices, right?
Yeah, so good evening all. In terms of the secure communication between the IoT devices, because you have different vendors, different devices, we are communicating to the particular platform, and the traffic is running over the internet, and which you need to make sure that is secure. And what I feel that still the devices which is being made by the vendor, they are not much focusing on the security. They are just making the product so that it can work, it can fit the data back to the platform. But I see that the organization who are working on these sensors, they should probably think of the security. They should test it frequently and make a benchmark that, and it's applicable for the organization also who are going to adopt the IoT solutions, that they test the complete communication thoroughly and make sure there should not be any loopholes. So suppose we have an application, when we put the application on the internet, we check all the application, we check all the codes, and then only we make sure that the my application is secure. Similar way, we need to think on the IoT devices also to make it secure, and so that because the risk is very high when you are connecting the IoT devices. And let's take an example for the smart cities, right? You are getting the data from different sources and you are monitoring the complete city. But if the data is being hacked and it goes to the wrong people, then they may have the complete the view of what is happening in the city, and which can be used for different malicious activity. Suppose you have the traffic and you are controlling all the cameras over the IoT, but if that is being hacked, the hacker may play a very crucial role and can jam the complete city.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think just to give a little more smaller context and more example, what you said, Yogendra, is how many of us use Fitbits? Okay. So that means your company provides you certain devices to monitor your health, right? Or that information has been translated to the servers across your companies whom they have signed a contract with. But if you're using Fitbits, have you read the company policy or the device, the policies that they have mentioned? Have you gone through it?
This EULA, you have to blindly accept it. I think 90% of the time people don't read it.
Yeah.
99% of the time people have no other choice but to just check or answer. If you don't check, you don't know.
Correct.
And the EULAs have a lot of catches.
We just search for the yes or okay. Where it is to click actually.
Seriously, I mean,
Agreed with you.
users have been taken for a ride. I mean, especially the end user license agreement.
Yeah.
They are most like 90% of the time in one side.
Absolutely. So,
Never taken care.
absolutely. So that's where here is a breach of your private data being sent, and you're not aware of what's been doing with that data from these servers, right? What are they analyzing? How are they using it? So we don't know. So the two risks that we are coming out across is the data privacy and security, right? So Inderjeet, if you want to touch upon how do we address this from a data privacy perspective?
I'll, enhance the Fitbit discussion what we had. 2012, the site of Fitbit was hacked, and the information of people was all there on the site. So it was some of the private movements of the people were also being put on the site. So that is the kind of privacy which you're going to lose in case of the IoT devices are going to be hacked. This is one. Second is, we got a lot of cameras in our house, right? We have cameras in the house, CCTVs, and we have it on an app, on an Android phone or an iOS, trying to monitor our houses. How many do you have? All of us, even I have, right? So that's where it is. Last year, October, November, similar kind of situation, where 1.5 lakh cameras were being hacked over the network. They were using all default passwords and user IDs. Similarly is the case because most of us don't change the user IDs and the passwords, and we are susceptible to hack. So whatever information is available is practically being seen by somebody else. And if you go onto the site called Shodan, and you find out cameras which are open, it will show you that. You can go onto IoT devices now. They have actually specialized search engine for IoT devices. You can find the open IoT devices over the network. So they are all susceptible to hack now. Privacy is, there's a very thin line which is available, which we need to take care of. So how much of data we need to actually share, how much of information we need to put on the network or the internet, we need to take a call. And when we talk of a IoT ecosystem or the IoT space, privacy is most important, especially of the individuals, especially of the people. That has to be taken care of.
Sure. So I'll give you an example of what are the typical household IoT devices that was compromised in the US East Coast, right? So I think last year sometime, it's available on the net. So the hackers brought down the entire East Coast for about between 5 to 6 hours. The entire business was down, and this was an attack that was done through typical IoT devices used by household items like refrigerators, your smart TVs, etc. Yeah. Toaster. Yeah. Toaster. Oh, toaster.
Hacked through the toaster.
Toaster. So there is a huge business impact, and even ISPs took a lot of time to bring this up, to entire sandbox it and etc. Right. So keeping that in mind, so it is very important to read our policies and what compliances that we are adhering to these IoT devices. So I think, Sachin, if you can help us with some of the policies that we can go through, right, from various vendors from an IoT security perspective.
See, as long as IoT devices are exposed to the risk of the consumers are well aware about the risk, what data is going on internet. But since I am from banking and financial sectors, I would probably not allow such devices to connect to any of corporate networks. So even now, if you see like many industries, many organizations in financial industries, they still have a policy like smartphones are not allowed, camera phones are not allowed in the organization, in the production floor. Right? So on a policy perspectives, yeah, on a security perspectives, as long as we get confidence on these devices, that these are secure to communicate with the corporate, and this will provide some value to the organizations of these IoT devices such to the organizations which can boost the businesses. Meantime, I'm not comfortable for these devices to connect to any corporate networks, etc.
Sure. So,
A question?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay, see now we are talking about policies, standards, correct? See, UL has come up with UL 2900. I mean, can anyone of you throw some light on how UL 2900, conformance perhaps protect the complete IoT stack? It can be in any space, be it in B2C or B2B. So IoT is pretty much everywhere. Unless these conformances are met with, addressed with, these breaches are continuing to be there. Any thoughts on how this UL 2900 can add value? If any one of you are aware of.
Okay. So I have not complete insight, but what I've read across is two main areas. One is that how you keep upgrading it. See, the point with IoT vendors today is that traditionally, as we all know, we used to have a machine which has high processing, high CPU, and that means it's bulkier and it gives you many heat, right? So it has to cool down. So when you make this device a tiny device, that means you're knocking out all those processors, right? All the CPUs. That means it has to be faster to the market, right? It has to be lesser time consuming for deployment, right? So that means there's a compromise on the security itself, right, to a certain extent. Now, what the standard talks about is how do you ensure to push the vendors to there is a secure way of designing it, right? And then how do you, the second point is how do you ensure that you patch the right way and you ask the vendors to release a patch. Because we all know that if there is a Cisco or a Microsoft, we are bound to get certain patches on a regular basis. But these vendors, we don't know what patches they're going to get in, right? And we don't have patience because every quarter they might release a new version. So the other version would be outdated. So this standard would typically talk about that. These are the two things that I'm aware of. I'm sure they would be talking more about from a device authentication perspective, access controls perspective, and also how do you ensure that there is a right awareness of how to use it. Because today you talk about IoT security is lying with the corporates, enterprises, right? We all use very less IoT devices, to be honest. But we are talking about numbers which are tenth and billions of numbers. Where are these IoT devices coming from? They're all going to the manufacturing sector, right? Today the Adanis, the Ambanis are using these IoT devices to track their containers, right, across the country. Is it the right way to do it? So everywhere the sensors are there, including from a lorry, petrol till the tire pressure consumption, to our, how do we, so there's a company which I'm not going to name, but they're going to measure, it's going to be coming in maybe next year, who's going to be measuring our sleep patterns. It's going to be in the market mid of next year.
So I'll add to this. Let's take example of the smart cities and apply this protocol. You're going to have different vendors giving different IoT solutions for water management or a power grid or your traffic management. Now, each IoT sensor which is going to have, it's got different pattern or power or the data rates, because like I was in the initial opening remarks, I told that every company is going to follow different protocols. That's what they're doing. So they're lacking the standardization as regards the data rates are concerned, their encryptions are concerned, communication protocols are concerned, right? So in the case of the smart city, if a different particular vendor has to do the patch management, what is the impact analysis of that patch on the other IoT devices? That will be very difficult to understand, right in point. Okay, a particular patch may be a patch for a software, but it may be a malware for some other system. So all those things are going to create a lot of problems when we talk in terms of integrated solution, especially in the case of the smart cities. That is why we say that it's going to be acid test when we are going to use IoT in smart cities.
So Shaik, as you know, the IoT is all across in terms of the machine learning is bundled to it, the cloud platforms are being using it, right? So how do you create awareness to securely use them of these tons of IoT infrastructure?
Very rightly asked question, Mahendra. In fact, basically, like we love to use the like connected devices. I'll just give the example. Like connected devices are becoming the USP of the organizations. Take the case of the banking, take the case of the retail. Like for example, if you go to the smart, like I mean to say, biggest malls in the Middle East, like when you enter there, you will be welcomed by a customer care executive with the name, hey Mahendra, like welcome. We know that like you are looking for 9 number shoes and X number like shirt. You are looking for these things. So how do they know about you? This is the like you searched about these things before you visiting, and through your connected device, through GPS track, that they know that you are there in the this thing, like I mean to say in their shopping mall, and you are looking for these particular articles, and they will guide you. And even like sometimes couple of like super malls are employing the ropes to guide you to the particular rack where these particular items are available. So this is becoming a USP. Yeah. But here the fun is like we like it, but the like biggest bane is like our data is exposed.
Correct.
And we like the way like while traveling, like I want the rice to be ready before I reach home. I can trigger that one from here before I start my journey. And I want the like a fridge to be operated, TV to run, TV to record, or CCTV to be connected. These are good. But how about like somebody taking access of these unsecured, unprotected channels of communication and like using them against human beings? Like the electrical stove can be used as a bomb. A refrigerator can be triggered to have an explosion.
Correct.
Once I have the machine in my control, it is easily possible. Like some of the member just discussed that like CCTVs can be hacked. The data is available on the net. So how about the privacy of the people using it? Yeah. CCTVs are like, we use it for the security purpose and we keep it inside our houses. So here, Industry 4.0, the revolution, IEEE has asked the industries like who are working on revolutionizing the 4.0 version of the industry manufacturing segment to adopt identity of the devices. That is how the devices will communicate among themselves, and how the users or the particular users access these devices. See, the access channels and the identification channels has to be established before these devices are brought into the human lives.
Correct.
To safeguard the basic minimum privacy like rights of the users and the safety of the users.
Well said. Well said. So this brings to the point where the infrastructure lying across, right, for these IoT communications. So how do we ensure that there are right gateway controls? There is actually server level mechanisms to detect if at all something happens. So Yogendra, can you highlight some of your experience on that side?
Right. So in terms of now, everything is moving to cloud, and the cloud seems to be a very fancy thing. But cloud again have the challenges which most of the organizations are reluctant to move to the clouds. But if you see the cost optimization and all, so they have to. Gradually they are moving to their undermining the risk which is there. So when your IoT data is coming to the cloud and you don't know who's managing, who's having access to the cloud, and apart from the organization who has their data in the cloud, maybe the service provider is not patch the system properly or access control is not in place, the different or maybe the hacker can get the access. So you can understand that if I just break that network and get into the cloud, so I can get all the information which is there. So we talk about the privacy of the people. You have the feed, you know the pattern, what is happening in the city, if you have the access to the CCTVs. So then on that particular scenario, you can identify or you can get more information from the people in terms of, suppose I want to do a recce for one particular person, and I do have the feed. I understand where he is going. He's going to office, and after office he's going somewhere else, so I can match that pattern and can, it may be some malicious intent which is there. So if the people is not at the home, and so I know the time period that the person will not be there, and the other things can happen. So it's play a very crucial role to secure the communication which is happening. And what I found that a lot of breaches is happening. I mean, a lot of organization is facing these challenges. We need to secure the infrastructure more proactively. We need to have the mechanism in place which can probably detect well in advance before the breach happens. So I see there's a huge opportunity in the market which the security professional can play a big role to secure those things, but the organization also needs to have that funding, and security should not be the cost, but just the investment for the organization.
Sure. So what it means is that when we consult on this IoT infrastructure and security concepts, we have to be very cognizant about what challenges that it bring, and we should be prepared. Not just we will be breached, but what should we do after getting breached, right? So Inderjeet, if you can highlight some of the methodologies, right, that we can adopt of the industry best practices that you have seen in your experience.
Yeah. I would like to add on to what Yogendra was saying of, the communication layer. So I'll continue with that particular point itself. Like three major parts of any IoT. One is the sensor, that's a device, the communication channel, and the cloud. And the bottom layer is the analytics, which the end-to-end, which is happening now. Now, whenever the information practically is being captured from the sensor, that's a device, and it goes to the cloud, where it is being, raw data has been computed and analytics has been done. Okay, the authorization and authentication of that particular device has been done through the digital signatures. And we cannot have an OTP kind of thing, or we cannot have a two-step authentication method. So digital certificates are the one which has been very much propagated. Second is, while we are talking of devices, two-way communication, there's a thought process, a two-way communication of the same bandwidth. We are going to avoid it in the manner like when sensor is sending the data from the cloud, let it go, but anybody trying to access the particular device from the cloud should be restricted. That entails that nobody should be able to take the remote control of that particular device. And also, nobody should be able to open any of the ports of those devices and launch a DDoS attack or get the control of the network. So that is one method of controlling a kind of a DOS attack on an IoT space.
Sure. So if you can also highlight a little bit on from an end user perspective, right? What should be I aware of when I implement this kind of controls?
When we implement these controls, one is the data which is being captured. What is the refresh rate of the data what we want? Practically what we are looking in IoT device sending a data to the network, that is very important. But what is the refresh rate? Because everything is depending on the data which is sent in, say 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or say half an hour. It's going to have a different connotation. So we have to have the trade-off between the data and the life of the IoT device, because if you want to have a life of an IoT device to be 5 years or 10 years, the refresh rate of data which is being sent from the user has to be restrictive, number one. Number two, password, user ID, which we actually talk in the cyber security space, follows here. Because what we have seen is that most of the devices which are being used in IoT now also, they go with default user ID and password. That is a major challenge what we are facing today. Even when we are fielding some projects, this is when we do the pen test and vulnerability assessment, this is where we find that it becomes a big problem. Yeah.
Sure. So this is brings to a point where the users who are using it, or someone who is managing it, right, has to be very aware of what's the risks.
Case in point, I'll go back to the same thing. The CCTV cameras what we have used, how many have changed their user ID and passwords? Only one, right? So 2. So I'm sure there will be many, because we are not doing it. And if we are using a default user ID and password, out of the 1.5 million or the 1.5 lakh cameras which were hacked last year, there were only a combination of 60 user ID passwords. The remaining were all default passwords. Okay. So that's the area which we need to address.
So not only the CCTV password, but there are people who are not changing their default router password. Everyone having Wi-Fi, but they are not changing their default admin password. And where the awareness is required to the people that what needs to be there in terms of the securing their Wi-Fi.
Absolutely.
Yeah, please.
See, the question is, now when these IoT security testing is being done, one of the critical elements is that there are, we all are aware that there are backdoor implants in some of the active components which are going to form the IoT solution, right? What would be the suggestion to do a sanity check whether there is a backdoor implant in a given active component, which may be sending information to the OEM? What is supposed to go can go, but what is the functional aspects? What
I can take it on.
Okay.
You see, this is what I was talking of. When an IoT sensor is being used, a particular device, I'll take a device, then talk of the ecosystem. The communication from the device to the cloud, there are only particular ports to be opened. And that ecosystem where we are putting it, that vulnerability assessment and pen testing, it should close all the other ports which are not required. Number 1 point. Number 2 point is the communication from server to that device, which a particular vendor may be very interested in knowing the health of the device, should not be permitted. It should only be a one-way communication with the other channel of communication should be only for the control panel or the control layer, and not for pushing in any data. So once we are doing that, the control by any of the vendors would not be there, number 1. Second is, if there's going to be only a software upgrade or a patch management which is going to take place in device, those ports need to be only opened. So two-way communication in IoT space, if you're doing it, is going to be a challenging. So this is the thought process. This is how we are trying to work on to avoid all DOS attacks from even the vendor wanting to know the health of the system. So those are the things which we are trying to avoid.
So in fact, we remember what happened during the Stuxnet attack, right? So the particular worm is planted on the machine itself. So when we talk about the IoT, the firmware which is being used, that needs to be tested thoroughly, so that there should not be any firmware which is sending the information to the OEM and which may be harmful for the complete solution or complete society. So in terms of, because Colonel is from the Army background, so if you buy any equipment in the Army, they test it thoroughly. They don't trust any vendor. So they do complete testing, make sure the communication which is happening, there should not be any backdoor entry to the OEM which can capture the information. So that kind of testing is required in terms of the IoT as well.
Now the question is how? How are you going to do these testing?
Right. So it's a difficult question how we can do that, but we can have the testing lab. I mean, it requires the government focus also, right? They need to find a regulatory requirement that any IoT devices which is going on the market should be tested. There should be some parameter to test it before it is being put into the market.
See, the problem is very acute. IoT is being rolled out. IoT systems, our ecosystem is evolving. We are still not come up with any regulatory body which is actually regulating the complete space, their parameters, their standards, and it's becoming a bigger problem in times to come, till the time we have it. Something like, I will say, the TRAI or the CERT, which is there. So these are the kind of bodies which we need right in time now, where we are able to control all this, even the firmware or the software or the communication from the vendor to the device and otherwise. So that is the threat area. Even that is also accountability. It's accountable to increasing the surface area of a threat.
The biggest drawback here is like the platform is big. Like starting from the trucks to machines to household items to these connected streets, connected environments, connected retail devices. If you go to the BFSI, mobile is getting connected to the apps and the servers kind of a thing, accessing the core banking and settlement servers. This is a chaos actually. So here there is no universal testing platform yet developed to test wide variety of the available devices here. Again, going back to the kind of the mitigation steps. Like if we found that the particular type of platforms are vulnerable to the data transmission, or the communication, or the access between the devices, or the connection between the devices, the biggest drawback is we cannot install an agent there to take the control or to bring it into the secure way. So we have to update the firmware. So that is beyond the scope of the IT. We need to bring in the manufacturer into confidence to have the latest version released. So again, for how many types of platforms, how many devices, there are a lot of versions, there are a lot of variety of the devices. So it's a big jungle there. So IEEE is working upon the kind of manufacturing principles, standards embedded into the manufacturing stage, wherein absolutely industrial revolution, wherein the kind of at the floor level the devices can be secured and tested to the available open ports, the kind of transmissions they do. As you mentioned, absolutely right. There are a lot of OEMs, they require the usage patterns of their devices for the marketing purposes and for the future versions to be released.
An extension to this is there are malicious intents by the OEMs.
Absolutely right.
Number one. And
absolutely.
Then there are NSA mandates. You know, even the biggies of the biggies like Microsoft, they've, I mean, I don't want to mention any of the large OEMs, but the fact is that the OEMs have been asked to keep certain ports open. They are intentional.
Yes, we know the
and they are mandates coming from none other than the NSA.
Yep.
And I mean, of course, you know, these WannaCries and the Petyas were none other than these loopholes.
Yeah, we need to.
We all know that.
Right? So all of us are aware of
absolutely right. So these states are as you rightly said, states will interfere into different ways of communication channels to have the control over the organizations and the national boundaries. But to some extent, sometimes they get open to the unauthorized agencies, as you mentioned, they may go into a later developmental stage as WannaCries. Though the primary motive may be to secure the countries, but later it may fall into different hands. Absolutely right.
I'd just like to add maybe 1 cent to the panel, that there is a program called Security Assurance Testing. See, security assurance testing is an end-to-end testing maybe for an IoT platform to do right from, somebody was mentioning about the penetration testing. That would only check the known knowns. But there is something, an unknown unknown, which is a black box to any active component. For that, one of the processes that are employed is called fuzzing. Fuzzing is essentially to test at the protocol level and to see if there are any protocol implementational errors, if there are. For example, there are vulnerabilities like, as the gentleman was mentioning about Stuxnet, where we saw there was a buffer overflow, right? Buffer overflow or an integer overflow or an off by one error attack or memory leak. So these things can be determined by performing a test at the protocol level, which is called fuzzing. I mean, of course, fuzzing will derive all these unknowns, and then, definitely the OEMs have to fix those vulnerabilities. If these vulnerabilities are not fixed, someday, an attacker can take advantage of that unknown, which is a black box, which we call it as a 0 day. In our organization, we call it as minus day. That is 1 day before the 0 day. So if we can encounter those before the productionization of the IoT, whether it is in manufacturing intelligence or in smart city or perhaps in any of these, the new initiatives that are coming up, this requires a rigorous testing before, the deployment, fuzzing, flooding, and then penetration testing. I mean, UL 2900, what I talked about, they have given certain benchmarks. These benchmarks will make sure that, yes, you are UL 2900 complied to an extent. I mean, again, I'm not saying that, you're not having another threat vector, but 98%, you are secured.
Right. But the organization is, if you have the regulatory requirement, then only they're going to follow it, because it is going to come with the cost. And a manufacturing industry who are just producing the sensors, they will not be keen to invest in the security and the testing till the time they have been asked to do it and there is a regulatory requirement. So we see that we should have some kind of body who should control it and who should make sure that the testing is being done before sending the sensor to the market. So that's what, and hopefully we will have very soon something from the government or from the other bodies.
But one thing we all would agree, these sensors are coming from Taiwan, China, millions of
Yes.
these devices, which are cheap devices. They may not be even $1, but they make a very integral role in the IoT scheme of solutioning.
Right.
So therefore, we can't control the OEMs. What best can be done would be, as a practice, IoT security testing, as a security assurance testing program. Perform these tests rudimentarily and then get a conformance, there is an okay from the test lab, and then, deploy it. Okay, again, you're not 100% secure.
Right.
Maybe 98%
Exactly.
secure can be mentioned. Right? Thank you.
Just to add, exactly, completely agree with all the points, right? There are certain, just to give you other perspective, the companies like Google's and Amazon and some of the manufacturing sectors like Volvo, right? For example, they have done some really good research and work on automated sensors, right? So if you look at the, I'm just taking Volvo because I've done kind of deep study on them. For example, on the driverless cars or driverless trucks, right? So they have a very seven-phased approach, which means first is driverless brake, then driverless acceleration, and then it becomes an overall package of how it becomes driverless car, right? So they have done a very deep study on their sensors at a protocol, and that protocol talks at a service, right? Associated service. The service has an associated port, right? Or it can have a custom port, right? Which you can define. And each stage, they have done a rigorous testing. They have done a very deep, black box testing, for example, right? And they also do, they don't patch that at all. So once they've done that testing, it's been deployed and that's been secured from that file is secured with an encryption model, right? So there are certain companies in the manufacturing sector who have done a really good job. Now, what we have seen is most of these research would need huge amount of investments. It needs huge amount of R&D cost to it. That means it becomes very longer time to get to the market. So addressing the needs of the market with a cheaper product or a lesser secure product, because it's not that they're aware of it, is more consumable by the industry. And that's how these products are coming out, right? And that's where, as security professionals, we would need to be pushing these vendors or the manufacturers that, hey, have you done these kind of standard following? Have you done this kind of various analysis of your services that you operate at? What are the different inbound, outbound traffic that you consume? In what level of traffics that you are associated with, right? And these are some of the policies also we should go through, right? And a simple example is that we all use smartphones, we all use Uber, Olas, etc., right? And you are aware of, I'm sure, right? Or if you're not, Uber tracks you once you drop off, right, from your car. It tracks you for next 2 minutes. Anybody was aware of that?
Yeah, we are aware. And
okay, yeah.
It is like not 2 minutes, but it is up to 5 minutes.
They increase it to 5 minutes. Right? So that means that everyone is tracking at some point, that means they are compromised, right? So it's an issue of, I think, as the panelists very much rightly put it across, that we have to be aware of first and then see what manufacturing levels that the sensors and are coming out, right? If we want to take those sensors in an enterprise level, we have to obviously shell out that kind of investments to get us very secure ones. And then how do we optimize and context to our environments? That's the most important aspect because this has to make sense for you, right? Because these sensors would be talking to cloud directly or indirectly. They would be doing a lot of analytics on top of that. And they would also use all these machine learning, the previous sessions that we spoke about. And that makes a very comprehend and very complex ecosystem. And I'm sure we all agree that it's still not solved, right? And it's in the journey of solving this problem, right? And it just adds more complexity, as I said earlier, more devices, more issues, right? Sure.
Hi, good afternoon. So I had a question, a point which was, I think, not covered was around the physical security of the IoT device. Sure. Now, where I'm coming from is particularly in smart cities. So my question will follow. I'll give you an example of what I did as part of a side project. What I did was I took a camera, CCTV camera. I hacked into it. I let it be a CCTV camera, but I injected my binary into that. And I had deployed it at some place.
Speak a bit louder.
Yeah. Okay, so I hacked into a CCTV camera, deployed my binary there, and I was launching a DDoS attack. I did it here and demonstrated that here in Bangalore earlier this year. And what I was trying to show was that the physical security of the IoT device is also equally important. You may run all the tests and all, but if I replace the binaries with something else or replace the firmware, who's going to take the accountability of that? The question comes as particularly in the smart cities, like we are doing smart lighting. So there are 1,200 street lights across Pune which are being replaced with IoT devices. Now nobody's going to man that every day. What if somebody takes one of them, compromises that, puts up a binary, and infect other similar IoT networks through that, or launch a DDoS attack somewhere else, right? So who's going to take the accountability of that? So the question is smart, in your opinion, is smart city the right step forward, or is it going to take us back at least in terms of security?
No, it's a right step forward. And as regard your physical security concern, it's there. You know, everything is going to be there in the command and control center. I hope you're aware of it. What is going to happen is all the verticals which are going to be there, say the grid, your lighting, your water management, your environmental center, your parking sensors. Now, all those will go into the abstraction layer, and there'll be a command and control center as big as this wall which you're seeing, data wall, where you'll be able to watch each of the vertical. I'm talking the verticals, the threadbare, okay? Where in case a particular sensor is being stolen or is manipulated, like I was saying, the refresh rate of data which is going to come from that particular sensor, it will keep on giving it to the layer. And that can be seen whether it's what has happened in case of a physical manipulation which has happened. And this will practically go onto the GIS platform. So like a Google. So you will be seeing a Google map this big, and you'll be able to see the complete city like sitting like this and monitoring it. And in case of a physical theft or something, you'll come to know. Okay.
So by and large, like all the communication devices, like the devices which you, as you mentioned, the CCTV camera, you used it for DDoS attack.
Right.
So here, the devices which are communicating on the network platform are by and large brought into the vulnerability assessment platforms of the corporations. That's not a big deal. The only issue is with the hybrid channels like Bluetooth or infrared. So the devices which are depending on these channels for communication and connections, they are the risk. So as the other speaker has mentioned, so bringing in the testing at the stage of manufacturing would be an option to secure them. So other biggest thing is security industry is watching the development of connectivity devices and observing how to take a further step. By and large, they are protecting the devices in their environments. Outside the IT, still it has to be brought into the purview of the IT security. That's the conclusion.
So there will be challenges, there will be a new learning and which can further be implemented. So, but it is the journey which is going to happen, and we all are going to experience or going to be part of it. So definitely there will be flaws which can be fixed over time. And but we are hoping that it is going to give betterment to the country to have these smart cities and IoT. And certain extent you can find out if any crime is happening, so the crime also can be prevented.
Sure. So thank you. And by this, I would like to conclude this debate. And it was a wonderful discussion, right? And we would like to be more secure in IoT and request all of your help, right? And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks to the moderator and the panelists. We would like to thank all of you on stage, requesting Ms. Samantha S., Marketing Manager, Explore Exhibitions and Conference, to present the certificate as token of appreciation on behalf of InfoSec Intelligence Conclave 2017. Thanks to our moderator, Mr. Mahendra Kumar. Inderjeet Singh. Thank you, sir. Thanks to Mr. Shaik J Ahmed. Thanks to Mr. Sachin Rajguru. Thanks to Mr. Yogendra Rajput. Our next speaker is Mr. Anshul.